So obviously the only thing that I care about is the Necromancer, because that's the only boy that I play. That's a lie. I will be playing the other classes, but I'll probably be somewhere late in season 1 if I'm being honest with you. There's just too much to test and too much to work on. And I got through like 5 changes and I thought, all right, the numbers that they're putting here are actually kind of ridiculous. For your basic skills, they effectively just increased all of their essence gem by 1 kind of across the board, except for Reap. Reap really didn't need it. But what they basically did is they said, okay, they generate more essence, that's great. For Reap, they reduced the cooldown to 4 seconds to be able to generate a corpse. So that means after a Reap, you generate 1 corpse, you have to wait 4 seconds, you can generate another corpse. This is a 25% increase in the total number of corpses that you can generate in the same amount of allotted time. That's pretty nutty. If they didn't also change Decompose, it basically would have killed Decompose as a skill. So they also went and made it so that Decompose generates more essence, does more damage, and also generates more corpses. Keep this in mind though. Decompose says wait 2 seconds, make a corpse, wait 2 seconds, make a corpse. Reap says make a corpse, wait 4 seconds, make a corpse. They make the same number of corpses over the same amount of time, except Reaps are front loaded and Decomposes are back loaded. That's why I think that Reap will continue to see use in the end game as opposed to Decompose, which always falls off every single time, except for people who like still believe in the dream of like pure minions, which I'm glad you have that dream, but I'm glad to see that these are getting touched at all because I would not have assumed that they did. What this also means is that in the early game, both of these skills are going to feel a lot better on the Necromancer, since the Necromancer in the early game is so shackled to corpse explosion that being able to generate corpses more quickly without necessarily like relying on Reaper skeletons just drastically increases overall like kill speed. So this means that generating more corpses more quickly means that you can pop them for more essence more quickly, so that you can blood surge more quickly, since blood surge is like one of the most powerful early game skills for the Necromancer. Just in general, a great change across the board. Hemorrhage and bone splinters also generating more essence is kind of nutty. This means that bone splinters can generate 11 essence if you're at greater than 50 essence, making it by far my favorite essence generator. And then bone splinters, especially on an endgame bone build, doesn't do no damage. It actually does like a pretty significant amount of damage if you get all 5 of your splinters into a single target and they all crit. It does decent damage. It's like all said and told like 300,000 to 500,000 damage, depending on like how many buffs you have up at that point. So bone splinters already was really good. Increasing the base damage by 1% is also really nice. More essence gen, also really nice. Hemorrhage is cool for those people trying to use hemorrhage for blood orbs. I know some people have some success with it. I personally don't, but I'm glad to see that go up as well. And now we get into juicy changes. Sever's base damage gets increased, and then Sever's travel damage gets increased to 40%. So Sever said deals 63% weapon damage. As it travels through a target, do 25% damage. As it travels back through a target, do 25% damage. And then the return attack, it does a second attack, does 21% damage. So if you put all of that damage together, you get 63%, 25, 25, and then 21. So that's 71 plus 63 is 134. 134 weapon damage for rank 1 Sever if you target the Sever slightly behind your target and you're right next to them. So Sever travels through them twice, hits them on the first hit, hits them on the second hit. That's a huge amount of damage for Sever, considering it also can apply vulnerable on the 4th cast, meaning you could already have 3 of these set up, and then you walk up to the monster, apply vulnerable as you cast it, hit them with 4 instances of vulnerable. If now Sever's base is 63%, and then both travel distances are 40%, so that is an increase of 30%, it's an increase of 33%. So we go from doing what we were doing before to 80, 146, 171, 171%. All of a sudden we're doing 171% on rank 1 Sever. That is a huge boost to Sever. That is massive. I was not expecting that in all sincerity. I felt like Sever was in a good place already. Oh, and in fact, that's also ignoring if you're actually getting vulnerable from somewhere else and you're getting the multiplier for minions. I mean, like 11 minions having a 22% damage multiplier, just 1.22 against that, basically an additional quarter damage. You're going to be doing over 200% weapon damage just by having your minions up and just casting rank 1 Sever. That's absolutely nutty. That's a super good change. I really like that. Bloodlance, Supernatural Bloodlance overpower requirement reduced to 6 casts. So previously Bloodlance would overpower on the 9th cast. It will now overpower on the 7th cast. The other interesting thing to understand about that mechanic is you used to have to cast 8 times, and then the 9th cast, which is actually your first cast on the next counter. So the next count of 8 would be the one that overpowers. So now it's after your 6th cast, the 7th cast, which will be your first cast on the next counter, overpowers. So that is also, you go from doing 1 overpower every 9 casts, which is actually every 15 casts, if you want to think about it that way. You do 2. You're now getting it every 6, 5, 12. So that's actually a pretty massive increase as well. Does this fix overpower by itself? No, but we'll get there. No, but we'll get there. I have a chat member who loves overpower. I will not disrespect them. I don't think that this single-handedly fixes it, but it makes it a lot better. And we'll see if there's anything else down here. Bone Prison cooldown reduced to 18 seconds. Okay. Dreadful Bone Prison's Fortify increased from 5% to 8%. So this will fortify you. I just want to double check if it's base life. This will fortify you for base life 5% per enemy trapped. So with like 5 enemies in there, you're getting 25% of your base life in Fortify. You'll now be gaining 40% of your base life in Fortify, which is a market improvement. I'm really happy to see that. I find it difficult to fit Bone Prison onto a lot of builds when Decrepify exists, unless there are bug fixes, which I haven't seen anything below here, but they weren't mentioned up top. There are a lot of issues with being able to generate Fortify on a Necromancer, most notably picking up Blood Orbs with the Blood Drinker glyph while in Blood Mist doesn't fortify you. And the second thing being that the functionality of Necrotic Carapace in Hued Flesh means that Necrotic Carapace only procs off of skills and minion abilities that specifically say that they generate a corpse, like Blood Mist, like Reap, like Reaper Skeletons, and doesn't trigger off of Hued Flesh. So it's a really abysmal place to be a Necromancer trying to generate Fortify effectively, and Bone Prison being this effective for Fortified gen might warrant using it over some other things on the skill bar, which is cool. It's already like good enough. Bone Prison is already definitely a good enough skill. This helps to push it over, I think, by a pretty big margin. Iron Maiden numbers were increased, kept W. Iron Maiden is very bad. We can go take a look at it though. We can go take a look at Iron Maiden. So Iron Maiden's base was that if an enemy that has Iron Maiden on it deals damage, they take 10% of weapon damage. Not of their damage, but of your weapon damage value. That ain't great. They've doubled it. That brings it closer to Shadow Blight's proc of 22% weapon damage. I still don't think that that's enough to really warrant using it for that effect at all. And then Horrid Iron Maiden increased to 20%. So let's go take a look at that. Horrid Iron Maiden increases its damage by a 1.15 multiplier. So you would go from doing 10% damage to 10% multiplied by 1.15, and now it's multiplied by 1.2. I still don't think that that's worth it. You would almost always use Abhorrent Iron Maiden if you were using Iron Maiden as an essence generator. You'd also use it for survivability. The return damage here is just kind of nothing. I think that's kind of a nothing burger, but increasing it helps it to be less of a nothing burger. Ooh, whoa, okay. Corpse Tendrils. Blighted Corpse Tendrils, chance to spawn a Blood Orb increased from 30% to 35%. I think Corpse Tendrils Blood Orb generation was already high enough. I will absolutely take another 5%. I like that. Dope. Absolutely. What is Bone Spikes? Is this the horse dismount ability? Horse buffs! I just saw the next update and I'm gonna have to talk about it for 30 minutes, but we gotta talk about horse buffs for a second. We have to talk about horse buffs. Does the horse ability do damage? Have you ever used the dismount ability? Necro horse buff. Sick. Awesome. Let's talk about this. This is what we have been asking for. If this works, this does not fix Necro Summoner, but it is a drastic move in the right direction. It is a drastic move in the right direction. Okay, so there's some monsters, right? Yeah, go get him. Go get him, boys. I'm so proud of you. If you are new to the Necromancer and you ask the question, why is Mac so excited the skeletons just walked up and engaged on monsters? Then I don't think you understand how bad they were before this. I think they just high-key made their AI better. For people who have been playing minions, this is exceptional, correct? Like, this is wildly exceptional. Can we talk about this? Okay, so hold on real quick. I want to try to get an example.
Already,
So
you might
that right there.
took a lot.
This is what it used to be.
Tier 4. It's
I walk
playable.
up. I cursed that.
It took
My
a
minions did
lot
not start
to get
attacking
here.
it. I got attacked. My minions begin attacking. This is what I was talking about before.
It's playable. It took a lot to get here. Already,
That is the difference.
you might
Like, that doesn't seem like a lot, but me walking up,
build.
cursing a pack
It's
of
playable.
monsters,
In World Tier
gaining
4,
their aggro,
it's
being within
playable.
melee range. My minions are doing
took
nothing.
a
I walk
lot
up
to
and
get
get
here.
attacked,
Already,
and then my minions attack
You
them.
might see some of the.
Minions still doing nothing. Gollum
Good
doing
job,
nothing
Gollum.
over there.
That's perfect.
But that's what it was before. Now, let me find something. What are we doing? At least they attacked. GG, that's huge. They're just fighting those guys. Get in there, minions. You're crushing it. You're killing it. I'm so proud of you. You just walked up and started fighting some dudes hanging out, doing nothing. You got me an ancestral. Okay, so this was huge. One of the things that I'd said a while ago was that at least allow me to like curse monsters and use that as a targeting device. And it looks like they're meeting us halfway. This still isn't being able to choose which monster to be able to force your minions to attack. I kind of understand that a little bit. I see the compromise here. People are going to say it's not enough. One, this is massive. This is just literally being able to choose to engage monsters in combat by cursing them, which is one of the first proactive things I want to do in combat as it stands, is a massive change functionally. Two, they just kind of seemed more aggressive in general. That might be a bit of like copium, don't get me wrong. They just seemed much more aggressive in general, which I appreciate. This isn't enough. This is a compromise. I do appreciate it. I see you out there, designers. I really do. I appreciate the compromise. Thank you. Kalan's Edict. Damage taken duration reduced to 2 seconds. Still useless. What do you mean I can't have taken damage within the past 2 seconds or my minions don't have a passive? No other passive that the Necromancer has says it's not active if you haven't taken damage. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry. It is just ridiculous. Why is my key passive conditional to not playing the game? Why is me not being in combat the only thing that buffs my minions from a key passive? Ossified Essence just says you have like 150% damage multiplier on skills. Rathma's Vigor, at the very least, says I have an automatic overpower and 10% life. Shadow Blight says you do 10% more damage and you get a secret multi-time critting 22% weapon damage, extra damage bonus. Kalan's Edict says nothing. It says nothing. You won't not take damage. This needs to say something else. I don't understand why it gives you a speed buff when we already have Inspiring Leader. That just says you need to be healthy for you to get the speed buff, and the Necromancer itself gets the speed buff. Kalan's Edict says effectively nothing. I don't understand this passive. I'm sorry. I hate to be that dismissive, but it is useless in its current state. Rathma's Vigor gets an increase to how often you need to be healthy for, or how long you have to be healthy for to get your Overpower. This is also a step in the right direction. You'll notice that they didn't change Blood Surge at all, which is very challenging. So if you want to be an Overpower build, the buff came to Blood Lance only. And then Rathma's Vigor, sure. Now I'm overpowering 3 times every 15 seconds as opposed to only 2 times. I don't know. I also think that Rathma's Vigor needs to like finally break the mold here and just say you have 20% chance to overpower instead of your base 3. I think there, and all of a sudden we have something. Also, I think that Rathma's Vigor should say your blood skills have a chance to spawn blood orbs. Blood orbs, it's wild that the best blood orb spawning mechanics in the game are corpse tendrils and embalmer aspect with corpse explosion. When the blood archetype is supposed to be where blood orbs come from, this is wild to me. We are clearly pointing in the fact that we want to be able to create more blood orbs on the Necromancer in general because that entire mechanic is very underwhelming. But the key passive doesn't give you blood orbs. That seems like a big miss to me. This is good. I don't think it's nearly good enough. Spiked armor, thorns, increased. Okay, sure. Why not? Legendary aspects, bursting bone, flat damage increase. Let's look at bursting bone. Bursting bone is the one that says that bone prison, when it's destroyed, creates damage. Wow, wowie caboodle. I don't know what this is supposed to do. I'll be honest with you. It's a bone skill, so theoretically it benefits from your bone passives. I don't know what, I don't understand what this aspect is supposed to do. It's kind of cool. I don't think right now it does enough. I don't think buffing its flat damage is the way to make it do stuff. Flesh rending. Let's take a look at flesh rending. Flesh rending says after decompose spawns a corpse, generate additional essence. This now says after it generates a corpse, generate 40 essence. So if I decompose hits multiple targets, I generate 3 corpses, I could generate 120 essence. Cool, now I can cast Bone Spirit, I guess. But if I were going to be doing that, I would be playing Infamous Bone Spirit. It's cool that it exists. I'm glad it got buffed. I'm dubious as to whether or not you can ever use Decompose on any build effectively ever. Fast Blood got a buff. That's very interesting. So Fast Blood says when you pick up a blood orb, it's a utility. I can just show you. It's a utility aspect, or I'm sorry, it's an essence aspect. Fast Blood says when you pick up a blood orb, reduce your ultimate cooldown by 1 second. Now it says up to 1.5 seconds with a minimum. That also means that the Codex of Power version of this aspect's minimum is now the maximum of the previous one. So like literally the bare value out of this is that everybody who is waiting to get a good fast blood aspect to be able to use it for reducing things like Bone Storm, Blood Wave, Keck W, or Army of the Dead, also Keck W, you can now get the benefits as if you had a max rolled one. And then people who have max rolled ones, maybe those get retroactively changed to 1.5, we'll have to check. But picking up a blood orb, reducing your ultimate cooldown by 1.5 seconds, with corpse tendrils increasing how many blood orbs it gets, starts to get very, very, very spicy. And here's the interesting part, kind of sets us up for a potential Decrepify nerf in the future. So I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying that that's exactly what this means, but we now have a better tool for reducing ultimate cooldowns, when I think that most people in the endgame Necromancer can agree that Decrepify currently does too much for a single skill slot. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm saying that has the potential to be one of the harbingers of a potential change to Decrepify. That is huge. Okay, so this is... Okay, that's another thing where unless I had an exact example to like show you, it wouldn't make sense. Quill rats used to literally not get pulled by corpse tendrils. They would move, if they were here, they would move to like here. They would not actually get pulled into the center at all. And if you noticed, the effectiveness of that pull was like pretty much 100% and everything was in it. Let's go back here and let's talk about the current meta builds that are legitimately impacted. by the changes. Now that I've really looked at it. One, every single build that's using Reap. So right now, that is Infinimist. That is any Darkness build, other than the one that also uses Blight instead of Reap, which I personally don't like. Bone Spirit, Infinimist, and basically every Shadow build is just more effective because of the change to Reap. The base damage doesn't really matter, but the reduced cooldown and being able to generate a corpse, meaning how often you're able to generate new corpses for Corpse Explosion or for Corpse Tendrils, or for the ability to resummon a minion, are just 25% more effective, which is great. If you didn't know, like endgame Infinimist against a single target like a boss would be using Reap every 4 seconds, not only to gain damage reduction, but to also be able to generate a corpse to increase net corpses per second for efficiency's sake for damage output. So the Reap change right here is very substantial and helps in those builds. So again, like the builds that I personally talk about a lot, Bone Spirit, Reap, Infinimist. And then for Bone Splinters, right now I use Bone Splinters on endgame Bone Spear. It's one of your best single target essence generators, on top of the fact that since it can shoot up to 5 bone shards, and all of your things that say your bone skills do more damage and have better crit chance, all work for Bone Splinters as well. So if I walk up right now, I can walk up right now and like go Bone Splinters a target. Hold on, let me go find one. We have this person right here. I walk up, I Bone Splinters, and then while I have the crit chance, so Bone Splinters on crits are doing about 24,000 per shard. Let's call it 20,000 per shard. And hold on, let me generate a corpse. Can I generate a corpse, please? Hold on, I'll generate a corpse this way. Now Corpse Tendrils first. And now I'm doing 70 to 90,000 damage per Bone Splinter. Call that 80,000 damage per Bone Splinter. I only have 1 rank in it. That's 400,000 damage per cast of Bone Splinters. That is pretty substantial damage. Increasing it by 1% is a 12.5% increase in overall damage, and it gets even higher when you have 5 Bone Splinters instead of 3. So people may not think that that increase in damage is substantial, but it really is. The Sever build was already good. I think Sever in general is like a B tier build. It's kind of like one step removed from Infinimist, but increasing its base damage by 3% on the initial base, and then remember that like base damage increases by a set amount. Increasing the base starter means that the base ender will also be better scaled. But just like raw damage increase just from this being an additional 33% damage is huge, obviously. So I think that helps Sever to stay relevant for longer, and you may not feel like you have to transition into Infinimist if you don't want to. The Bloodlance change helps a pure Overpower build be able to put out, considering from the people who play it that I trust that have really pushed it into the end game, you're using Blood Surge and Bloodlance and Rathma's Vigor. So the change from Bloodlance being able to be activated on the 7th cast as opposed to the 9 cast, along with the 3-second reduction here on Rathma's Vigor, if I were to kind of try to do the math there, it is somewhere around like a 20% overall increase in number of Overpower casts per an allotted amount of time, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 25%. I'll let people who play the build a lot more than me really weigh in on how much more powerful it is. But for a pure 20 is good. Yeah, so my resident subject matter expert, Prof. Gallo here, is saying roughly 20% increase in number of overpowers, which is interesting. If you've been listening to stream recently or what you heard me say earlier, I basically want Rathma's Vigor to just say you can overpower 20% of the time, and then leave Bloodlance and Blood Surge to have their automatic overpowers. So getting roughly a 20% increase in total overpowers is kind of like the same thing if you're running the full overpower package. So it's like a compromise they didn't even know that they were making with me, but that is good. I still don't think that's good enough, but it is good. Bone Prison change makes this a really competitive and really desirable alternative to using Decrepify on similar builds. I don't think that's good enough, but especially earlier on when you are pushing and you're still like struggling to be able to generate Fortify, I think it's a great change. There's still a couple bugs like we just demonstrated that are stopping Fortify from working. This can be used on a pure bone build, so something like Bone Spirit or Bone Spear, because you're able to reduce the cooldown so often by rapid ossification, but that requires 3 additional points that you're not putting into damage. So right now I think that Bone Prison is a little bit suboptimal. Great option for like AI manipulation. I don't think that has a huge impact on builds, but it makes it a lot more desirable to use. The Corpse Tendril change affects every build that's using Blood Drinker and also makes Blood Artisan's Cuirass speed farm builds a bit better, so that's cool. I always like to see that. Obviously, bone horse build is now in the making. Hold on. Is the horse skill a bone skill? Hold on. Horse skill when? It's not a bone skill. Why isn't the horse skill bone spikes a bone skill? Okay, here's my plea to Blizzard. Make bone spikes a bone skill and let the carnage commence. Okay, moving on. Unironically, every single minion build has now just become significantly more viable. How much this impacts it is still directly related to how ineffective and inefficient damage scaling on minions is in general. I don't think that this addresses the problem that the best minion builds, in air quotes here, because I don't think that using a Ring of Mendeln is actually a minion build. I think it's a Ring of Mendeln build. The best minion builds are Death Speaker's Amulet and Ring of Mendeln. And until those things don't scale off of the player and instead scale off of the minions, minion builds still are going to be second class build archetypes. They are not going to be a primary build archetype. This helps a ton though. It is meeting us halfway and not quite giving us a target ability, but allowing us to force our minions to engage monsters who are off screen, which is one of the primary things that you have to do to be able to push high nightmare dungeons, is begin attacking and crowd controlling monsters who are at the edge of your screen before they gain aggro. This helps. This bridges that gap a little bit. It's incredibly impactful. It might not be enough, but just from like a very small amount of testing that you saw, it really seems like minion builds are like the minions themselves are just more aggressive, proactively attacking monsters that are within range if they would be threats. And that is just something that you didn't get before. Like if you saw the quick little clip I showed from my video, I walked up, cursed monsters, the monsters engaged on me, my minions didn't do anything until I actually got hit. So that's significantly better. They don't talk about it, but I think it's like a weird shadow buff that they also included in there. We already touched on Rathma's Vigor. I already yelled about the fact that Kalan's Edict is basically useless. Thorns being increased, sure, why not? Like, why not, right? You might as well get it. Absolutely. A 6% increase in damage here. Before is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a 25% increase in damage roughly. That's pretty significant. I'm not going to pretend like it's not significant. It is pretty significant. But like, is that enough? I don't think so, but we'll leave that there. And then the fast blood change is incredibly powerful. A lot of builds like to use blood orbs. A lot of builds benefit from reducing cooldowns with blood orbs. This is like, you know, pretty famously, included on my Bone Spirit build, right? Making a bunch of blood orbs gets me my Fortify, and then it reduces my cooldown, so I Bone Storm up more quickly, so I don't have to use Decrepify. I think nowadays I would just use Decrepify anyways, but like, hey, that's a whole other conversation. This helps though. And again, I think it a little bit foreshadows the potential functionality changes to Decrepify. Because if we have more better aspect options for reducing cooldowns on our ultimates, which is like one of the hardest cooldowns to be able to manage, we're not as reliant on Decrepify, which is pretty cool. I don't think that it invalidates Decrepify as it currently stands, and I also don't think it holds a candle to Decrepify in the way that it currently works. I think there's a lot of good in here, but what I really see is the builds that I think are the best got better, and the builds that I think struggle have not had their issues negated yet. And while a lot of bugs have been reported long after they already had this balance patch in the works, I'm still waiting to see a lot of the bugs on the Necromancer that are well documented at this point actually get fixed so that we can better understand the true scope and the true viability of a lot of the different builds that right now are being held back by it. In general, good balance patch. I can't speak to the other classes for the Necro. I think there are a lot of good changes here. I'm really excited to see what happens in season 1 because if they don't address some of those issues, I think right now the meta is going to very much be a lot of the exact same that we've already been seeing. That's kind of where I leave it with that. A lot of the good builds got better. That's cool. Good builds got stronger. Necromancer got kind of stronger. Didn't get any movement skills. The horse ability does no damage, but some of the strong builds got stronger. Pretty cool. Hopefully we see more. Thank you very much for watching this. I hope it wasn't too rambly. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.